But so today I want to talk to you a little bit about horticultural therapy and what it is, and and the uses for it, and in conjunction with other things. So I'm going to start today by just kind of sharing a little bit. I'll recircle back on it, but I'm going to share a little bit. Um, I'm going to share a poem I wrote. So the recording part just makes me feel even more vulnerable, but we're good. So I'm going to share a poem I wrote that kind of summarizes a little bit of my own um, process through grief and gardening and plants, and kind of opens a door a little bit on how I wanted to get into horticultural therapy. So, um, okay. So I went to the garden to sit with grief. She meets me there often. Some days we sit in silence, while other days we angrily throw soil. There are days where the sun shines down as if kissing your face, and other days that are dark with steady stream of rain. But ever so consistently there, the garden held me. It supported me in my failures, showing me that tomorrow was another day. And with it, there would be the glimmers, a seed that would germinate, a newly laid, a newly laid, a nest of newly laid eggs, a bumblebee landing on a flower that barely was able to support its weight. The garden is full of life and with it death. As the seasons fade unto each other, there is a raw sense of beauty in it, teaching me that through it all, the sun keeps rising, the seasons change, and new life begins again. I went to the garden to sit with grief, and she embraced me as I was, with a comforting sigh of relief, welcoming me home. So, horticultural therapy. So, we're going to go over today how gardening and plant-based activities can promote physical, mental, and social and emotional well-being in a therapeutic practice. What is horticultural therapy? Horticultural therapy is a clinical practice that uses gardening and plant-based activities to achieve specific therapeutic outcomes and goals. It is guided by trained therapists, and clients engage in tasks like planting, pruning, and harvesting to improve physical, cognitive, emotional, and social well-being. It's the evidence-based approach creates meaningful connections between people and nature, promoting healing through purposeful engagement with living things. There are three foundations in horticultural therapy, kind of the essential pillars that define the horticultural therapy practice. So there are therapeutic goals, and it's very specific. There are every horticultural therapy session is planned out, thought out, planned out with very specific therapy goals in mind, with specific measurable treatment objectives. And it's tailored to individual clients and their needs through either their cognitive, their physical, social, or emotional needs. The It's plant-based activities, obviously. So it includes things like gardening tasks like planting and watering and pruning, harvesting, and they serve as a therapeutic interventions that engage multiple senses and promote active participation in a healing process. The end goal is the actual of the horticulture therapy is actually the process of horticulture therapy, not the outcomes of it. So the outcome of the purpose of horticultural therapy isn't so much the plants that we're planting, it's the process of the planting and connecting with nature. Horticultural therapy is governed by a horticultural therapy association, and it is facilitated by certified horticultural therapists. Um, and adapted activities for the clients that provide support and document the progress to ensure meaningful and therapeutic outcomes. What kind of populations does horticultural therapy serve? Well, first of all, it can just about serve anyone. So main characters or main populations it serves is they're like stroke victims, spinal cord injuries. There's actually in brain injuries. There's a great, amazing horticultural therapy program at Craig's Hospital, which is a brain injury and spinal cord injury hospital here in Denver. It can help with intellectual disabilities, so working with populations such as Down syndrome, mental illness, trauma victims, homeless populations, elders in elder care facilities, dementia, children in youth programs, those with visual impairments or addictions, or those who are incarcerated. Types of horticultural therapy programs. They're kind of broken down into three different types of horticultural therapy programs. One would be vocational, so that's employment and job training skills. So this would look like let's say a horticultural therapy program for incarcerated individuals, whether it be state prisons or jails. So it gives them skills and job training so that when they are released, that they have actual job skills to take into the workforce to gain employment. Youth programs is another great one, kind of the same thing. Whether you teach them skills like time management, working um, working well with others and individuals in the program. And then intellectual disability work programs um, as well. So there is actually was a really great um, work program for those with intellectual disabilities where they actually had a full large scale greenhouse, and they would start everything from seed and transplant the plants, and then would have big huge plant sales, and it supported their whole job work program. The sale of the plants did. So another section of type of horticultural therapy is therapeutic, whether that be a recovering setting from recovering from illness or injury or rehabilitation. Another example of that again would be like Craig's Hospital, somebody who had a traumatic brain injury or spinal cord injury. So traumatic brain injury, working with plants can improve cognitive skills and sequencing for physical skills. If somebody had a stroke victim, and they have poor mobility on one side of their body, um, working with plants can help develop strength. So, you can work with a lot of different therapies to improve those, such as exercising and physical therapy. But when you add an element of enjoyment or something that's connecting to nature and the pace of nature, and um, it just adds another element to continue for those individuals to continue to work harder at them because it's more in a more enjoyable environment. And the other type of horticultural therapy is the wellness. So basic overall thriving of life. So that can look like elder programs. It's a great treatment for anxiety. Burnout is a big one lately, and school programs. So just in general, think of like school garden club programs. I actually had the joy of running a garden club program for one of a DPS elementary school for their affected needs kids. And so overall wellness, getting them outside, getting them in the sun. It's great for kids with ADHD. It gives them a place to get out a lot of that energy that they have. Different clinical settings for horticultural therapy. So like I talked about, like rehabilitation centers. So horticultural therapy thrives in rehabilitation centers where patients recovering from injury, such as surgery or traumatic brain injuries or strokes, engage in gentle gardening tasks. Planting, watering, and tending to plants helps rebuild strength, coordination, and fine motor skills. It can also be a great thing for your gross motor skills as well. A lot of people in rehabilitation centers struggle with standing on their feet for long periods of time or balance, and working outside in the garden works with all of those things to help rebuild strength. Like I said before, it provides a meaningful and goal oriented activities. So not only are they working hard to build strength and coordination and things like that, but the work that they're doing is very meaningful to them. It can help build self-esteem and confidence in people who potentially had a stroke and struggles, with mobility on one side. While they're doing that, they get those wins. So they have success, those little successes that help build up their confidence. And in mental health care facilities or elder care facilities, mental health facilities integrate horticultural therapy as a way to reduce anxiety and depression symptoms. And in the senior care communities, benefit greatly as residents find purpose in nurturing plants, stimulating cognitive function, and enjoying sensory experiences. Um, these settings create a calming environment that promote healing and social connection. So as like elders who go into elder care facilities, they tend to have the feeling of losing a lot of their autonomy. And by giving them tasks like this that they can complete on their own helps again build that confidence up to them and helps kind of regain some of their lost autonomy. And in both mental health and elder care, a lot of people can feel really disconnected. And the nice thing about having them involved in an activity where others might be in the same space, it provides a social connection, which is really huge. Other clinical settings for horticultural therapy, we briefly talked about correctional facility. San Quentin is one of the most notorious prisons. They have had one of the longest running and most successful horticultural therapy programs in their prisons. It's been there since the 70s. And horticultural therapy in correctional facility provides structured, hands-on way for individuals to build responsibility, regulate emotions, develop practical life skills. Working with plants can support rehabilitation by fostering patience, self-worth, and a sense of connection in an otherwise restrictive environment. A lot of these programs that like the work programs or the horticultural programs that they might be involved in are used as a reward system. And so um, to be able to participate in these activities, they have to uphold a certain level of efficacy to belong in these programs. And so um, it's proven to be beneficial all around. In fact, they ended up kind of having a problem because these horticultural therapy programs were so nurturing to the individuals who took place. In California is a great example of it. They did a research study on they were hopeful that the horticultural therapy program and these gardening programs that the participants were participating in would be goal building so that when they got released out of the correctional facility that they wouldn't be repeat offenders. But what they were finding is that it was such a joyful experience for them that they were repeat offending just to get back into the program. But what it proved was not that it wasn't a valuable thing for to have in correctional facilities. What they determined is that they needed more outside of the correctional facilities to support and programs for them to get involved in. Like I said, it teaches them valuable work skills that they can bring into job experiences. Children and youth programs. It's a subject that's really near and dear to my heart. I love working with children in gardening. They are just so naturally inquisitive and curious, and they see through these wonderful eyes of just everything's new to them. And so horticulture or gardening is a perfect place for kids to be. They learn all about insects and bugs and worms and um, I found one of the most favorite things kids really just wanted to do was just dig in the dirt. So I always would leave time for them just to dig, to dig, kind of like a sandbox, but with soil. And so horticultural therapy in children and youth programs, it offers hands-on and engaging way to support emotional regulation, social skills and healthy development. Rule following too. You can't be in a garden setting without having, rules to follow because you're using tools, and so there's a lot of safety involved. So it helps them develop social skills. It helps them build sharing and community work. So, it might take two people to complete a task, and so it builds that engagement. Working with plant encourages curiosity, builds confidence, and provides a safe place for expression and learning and connection. So building motor skills through gardening. These are some of the benefits of horticultural therapy. Horticultural therapy engages your fine motor skills through planting, pruning, and potting. Clients can rebuild hand strength, coordination, and dexterity while performing the meaningful tasks that can translate directly into daily living activities. So, have in your mind, like if you're relearning some of these fine motor skills, um, like transplanting seedlings and things like that. That might help a person who suffered a stroke. That relearning some of these fine motor skills might, help them to be able to eat on their own once they are out of a care facility. So spoon use is real similar to some of those fine motor skills of transplanting, cultivating mental wellness. So, working with plants significantly reduces anxiety and improves moods. That's actually been proven scientifically. The sensory experience of touching soil, smelling flowers, and nurturing growth creates a calming environment that promotes emotional regulation and mindfulness. Mindfulness is a key thing when you're working in a garden. It's very grounding. It causes you to slow down and go at the pace of nature. So it is a form, in my opinion, is a form of mindfulness. Evidence-based horticultural therapy activities. So some more of the key benefits of horticultural therapy is that it offers diverse therapeutic activities. It's very it you can adapt horticultural therapy to a bunch of different populations that you're working with. And really, no population is excluded from this. Um, our first two set of classes, so I'm currently going through a horticultural therapy program through the Horticultural Therapy Institute, which we're lucky enough to have it based out of Denver. Um, and so a couple of the pioneers in horticultural therapy run the Horticultural Therapy Institute, and they helped get horticultural therapy up and going throughout the whole state of Colorado. And it's a international course that they offer. So we had a lady from Colombia in my first class, and so they offer it online too. So it's really cool. But one of the cool things is one of their students started a horticultural therapy program at this lovely place called the Anchor Center for Blind Children. And this is for pretty much young children from birth all the way up to preschool. And they have an active horticultural therapy program for blind and visually impaired children. So I just think of all the like there's no limitations to it, which is just wonderful. But it seed planting, helps develop fine motor skills. Sequencing is a huge one because there's steps. There's a first process of this and then this and this. So sequencing, it helps develop patience. Sensory garden engages all senses through textured plants, fragrant herbs, and colorful flowers. This is this in itself, nature in itself, and working with plants and working with nature is in itself very somatic. So, nature crafts like pressed flower art and wreath making build creativity and coordination. For light movement, just 2 weeks ago, I did a nature plant mandala not class, session. And it was so fun. And it was, these are things that don't necessarily cost money or need anything. These were all things I collected outside around nature, different leaves, different shapes of things, acorns, um, grass, seed heads, flowers that we, were able to arrange in mandalas. Um, it that in itself keeps you very present and in the moment. Has anyone seen the viral video or of going around on Instagram, TikTok, probably everything about the Drew Barrymore show? And oh, if I find it, I'll send it to you guys. I'll link it or do something. I don't know if I can link it in Discord, but it's amazing. It's Drew and one of her main guys. I don't watch the show, so I don't know. But it was talking about a guy and there was flowers, and they were like, how do you make flowers last longer? And the guy was so charismatic. He grabbed their hands and he's like, flowers, the purpose of flowers are to ground you in the moment and to make you be there and be present. Flowers aren't meant to last forever. They're supposed to ground you in that moment, and then they eventually fade. And I thought that's just he explained it so beautifully. Um, but so flowers in itself or nature and working in the garden is, like I said before, is just a very um, meditation type of therapy. Garden maintenance tasks such as watering and weeding and harvesting promote physical activity, responsibility, routine building, and lasting therapeutic benefits. I think one of the key benefits with a lot of population is the nurturing factor in itself. When you are responsible and tasked for growing something and caring for something, it's a very nurturing based therapy. How is horticultural therapy used in grief work? Um, Horticultural plants in general have been used for, thousands of years with dealing with grief. Whether it's creating living memorials, we bring flowers to funerals, we bring flowers to grave sites. You can plant memory gardens or planting a tree for a loved one. Um, Grief groups work amazing developing a grief garden because it is a community-based project where it brings people together who are all suffering from grief so that they have that connection, right? So they feel like they're not alone. Um, ritual rituals of care, kind of like I was talking about earlier, mindful rituals that mirror the process of tending to one's grief. So it brings that nurturing aspect into it. So, when you're grieving, one of the most important things is to maintain, care for yourself, and that can be really hard. So by by planting and watering and fertilizing, it brings back that nurturing aspect into somebody who's grieving's life. There's the whole symbolic plant choices. So rosemary for memory, lavender for calm. It can be very calming. Forget-me-nots for planting for somebody to remember them by. I hear that all the time. And it's very frequent for people to want to plant a tree in honor of their loved ones. Or I have this theory that everybody has like a mother flower or a grandmother flower. And the lovely young lady I was working with the other day, her father was extremely proud of his rhubarb plant. And you can tell as we were talking about plants and memory plants, it kind of hit her um, that that it brought back this memory of her father and how he loved to work in the garden and he grew amazing rhubarb. And when he had passed away, and they at his funeral they put rhubarb on top of his grave, or on top of his casket. Um, and it was kind of a thing that she'd kind of forgotten. Lilacs. Lilacs are my grandmother flower. She was one of the most important humans ever to be in my life. And she had hedges of lilacs. And I cannot, in the springtime, cannot think of her or when I smelt a lilac, I cannot help but think of her. Um, the observance of the seasons, so cycles of dormancy and regrowth in the garden reflects one's own healing process. I think that's a key thing with grief is it is grieving is like seasons, right? You have seasons of winter through grieving. You have seasons of spring where you start to come, out of your grief. You have summer where you're actively growing, and any of those seasons can kind of pop back in to one another. So I think it really um, emulates a grieving process through the cycles of dormancy and regrowth in a garden, and it engages the senses. Anything, there's that wonderful therapeutic process of, what's five things you can see, what's, four things you can hear. Well, the garden is just naturally anchors you in all of your senses. So it anchors us in the presence, the touch of soil and having the soil in your hand. You can breathe in fragrances, the sounds of birds. So, like I told you before, I am in horticultural therapy program. And I finish up in September. And once I'm finished, I will be going through the arduous process of getting certified. Um, and a lot of that is doing things like this, talking, about horticultural therapy, or actually, I have 500 hours of actual horticultural therapy sessions I need to complete that's a small chunk of it. It is in conjunction with my other degrees I have. I have a degree of science, a bachelor's of science in horticulture and landscape design. So it kind of goes in conjunction with that. But kind of what brought me back into horticulture, because I've worked with plants ever since I was young. My mom was an avid vegetable gardener, but I was just managing garden centers and I own my own gardening company, but horticultural therapy in itself kind of kept coming back into my life. So when I was in my teens, what's kind of started my whole connection with plants and nature, when I was in my teens, my dad committed suicide. And my mother did, who they were divorced, but my mother did the best she could in the fact that she's kind of a hard German woman. It was a grin and bear it. It was a get through it. It was you're allowed 3 seconds of feelings and then you need to plow forward. Um, which I will credit at that moment in time for helping me survive. Um, I had no support, no, and so I think that's why I'm just always so drawn to people who provide services for grief, because I just think of myself if I had had that when I was younger, how much easier, and maybe not easier is the right word, but more supportive I certainly would have been. I was very lost. Lost, I was angry, I was hurt. Um, and plants and nature became my refuge. Um, Nature in itself is non-judgmental place. You could kill 2 million plants and nature doesn't judge you for it. Um, but it was a non-judgmental place and I could pour myself into grief, my grief, my anger, and even my joy. Um, it gave me something to focus on when I was really, really lost, something I could be good at, and it built my confidence when everything kind of felt broken in my life. Um, and I think that's something that's not talked enough about with grief is that you can feel so worn down by it that you lose your identity in it. And because of that, you're very insecure. You're insecure how you fit in the world. So being able to identify plants and remember how to take care of them. I mean, when I was a teen, it was huge for me. It really gave me purpose. Um, Still to this day, um, I can feel all the changes in the seasons. Um, I'm very, very in tune to it because of, I think when you go through grief and things that kind of hold you, that container that holds you in that grief, you become very, very in tune to it. Um, and tiny miracles that unfold. Um, I've been doing a lot of seeding over the last few weeks. I grow over 800 tomato plants and 500 pepper plants. And just as the very first time that I saw a seed germinate, I still have that level of excitement today. Um, a flower blooming, a bee landing on a flower. Um, I don't at the moment because I changed pants. But there, at any given moment, I usually will have a stone or an acorn in my pocket, um, or a seed or a flower. I'll try to if a flower breaks, I'll try to hold on to it. Um, I I have a squirrel friend in my yard who at 4 o'clock every day, she comes up to my front porch to visit me, um, primarily for food. Her name's Tilly and she's lovely. But I will just sit out in the garden with her for 5 or 10 minutes at a time, just sitting there with her. And she's quite cute. She'll come up to a couple feet of me and she'll just sit or eat, and it's so charming. But slowly the garden over time taught me that life continues and that grief and growth can coexist. Helping people through the modality of the garden is a theme in my life that continues to circle back and resurfaces. And when I was doing my thesis project in college, long time ago, for landscape design, I designed a lovely horticultural therapy garden for a really cool nonprofit organization in Montana. Um, and then working with garden clubs and kids at elementary school. I started a gardening club program for the affected needs kids. That's primarily kids with primarily social behavioral disorders that just made it so that they couldn't fit into a normal class setting. And I was really shocked at how sterile and strict those environments were. And in that demographic of kids, I found was the exact opposite thing they needed. Didn't, I mean, the exact opposite thing that from what they really needed. I felt that their brains just learn differently. And so they need to be engaged differently. And I felt the garden and garden projects fit that beautifully. It gave them space to be creative. It gave them an outlet for their energy. They loved to fill wheelbarrows full of soil and move it across the garden, dig holes. Um, and I was actually offered a horticultural therapy position at a youth's female correctional facility that I didn't take at the time because I thought, oh, I've got other things to do, other important things to do. I've got this and I've got that. Um, and then through fostering one of my daughter's friends for 3 months and working with some of the lovely organizations like the Child Advocacy Center and Child Services, I realized that I don't want to just work with plants. I want to work with plants and improving people's lives. So, key takeaways from horticultural therapy. Horticultural therapy is a therapy that's very intentional and goal oriented. It works great alongside with existing therapies. It's all about the process of the activity and not the end product. It is acceptable and adaptable to many different populations, but I would say all populations. It meets people where they are, which is key, and nature can support healing in very simple ways. Some great resources for some more information is the American Horticulture Therapy Association website. It also has a ton of great information on there to help just general therapists integrate nature-based interventions and practices into their practice. And like I said, I'm going through currently the Horticultural Therapy Institute, which is local. It's based out of Denver. And some great book recommendations, if any of you want to do some further reading, is The Profession and Practice of Horticultural Therapy and Horticultural Therapy Methods. Both of those were written by Rebecca Holler and Christine Capra, who are the head of the Horticultural Therapy Institute in Denver. Like I said, they are huge pioneers in the industry. And for more of just a really fun read, I would recommend to any therapist in general would be The Therapist Garden. And so on that note, thank everybody for coming to my TED Talk. No. But I'd like to just leave you with the thought of healing, like a garden, is not linear. It unfolds slowly, season by season, and nurturing life. We are reminded that even in the darkest of soil, new roots can take hold.